Thunder cracked above Accra's night sky as the grand ballroom of the Kempinski Hotel shimmered under golden lights. 300 guests turned toward the stage, where a young black woman 7 months pregnant stood frozen before a microphone. Her name was Amara Nwosu, and the man smiling proudly at the altar was Ezekiel Owusu, the billionaire who had once abandoned her. Tonight he wanted to humiliate her, make her sing while he married another. Cameras rolled, guests whispered, and the weight of the city's eyes pressed down on her trembling hands. But when Amara opened her mouth, what poured out wasn't shame. It was truth. A song born of heartbreak, forgiveness, and fire, the kind of truth that could ruin a kingdom built on lies. Before we step into this story of betrayal, courage, and redemption, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next African story that will take your breath away. The morning sun over Accra was merciless, spilling gold across the polished glass of the Owusu Tech Tower. Inside its top floor, Ezekiel Owusu, 32 years old, and already one of Ghana's most talked-about tech entrepreneurs, leaned back in his leather chair, sipping imported espresso. From his window, the city looked small, people like ants crawling through Makola Market, trotros honking below street vendors calling out prices in Ga and Twai. He saw none of it as human. To Ezekiel, it was noise-proof of how far he had risen above the chaos. He straightened his cufflinks, solid gold engraved with his initials EO, and admired his reflection in the tinted glass. Everything about him screamed success: the charcoal suit tailored in Milan, the silk tie, the calm arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him applause. But behind that perfect image was a heart carved from ambition and ice. Once years ago, Ezekiel had been different. He grew up in Nima in a small concrete house with leaky roofs and the smell of fried plantain drifting from every corner. He knew hunger, he knew struggle, but success had changed him. No, it had consumed him. Now, when he thought of his past, he saw only shame, something to bury under money and marble floors. A knock came on his office door. His assistant Kofi poked his head in. "Sir, the designer from London has arrived for your wedding suit fitting." "Let him wait," Ezekiel replied without looking up. "I'm reviewing the guest list. Every politician and CEO in this city must attend. It has to be the event of the year." "Yes, sir," Kofi murmured and disappeared. Ezekiel's lips curved into a small smile. In less than a month, he would marry Adana Eze, daughter of one of Ghana's most powerful business magnates. Their union wasn't built on love. It was a merger, a social empire in silk and champagne. The wedding would prove once and for all that he had arrived at the summit of Ghanaian high society. And to make the victory complete, he had planned one cruel detail: a performance by Amara Nwosu, the woman he once loved, the woman now carrying the child he refused to acknowledge. She would sing at his wedding like a hired entertainer, her belly visible, her voice trembling while he exchanged vows with another. It would be poetic justice, he told himself. The woman who had once wept over him would now sing praises at his triumph. But deep inside, even Ezekiel couldn't explain why the thought thrilled him so much. It wasn't love. It was power. The power to watch someone break and know you caused it. Across town, in a quiet neighborhood in Osu, Amara sat on the edge of her bed, a hand resting gently on her swollen belly. Her room was small, bare walls, a tiny fan that clicked each time it turned, and a radio that hummed softly in the background. Outside, children laughed as they chased a ball through the narrow street. The scent of palm oil stew drifted through her open window. Amara was 28, with deep brown skin that glowed softly in the sunlight, and eyes that carried both strength and sorrow. Her voice, her voice was something heaven must have crafted on a good day. It wasn't the kind of perfection you found in studios. It was raw, human, and full of emotion. When she sang, people felt everything she had ever lived, her hope, her pain, her love. But today her voice stayed silent. Bills lay scattered on the table, rent overdue, hospital checkups unpaid. The refrigerator hummed emptily except for half a loaf of bread and a bottle of water. She rubbed her belly gently and whispered, "Don't worry, my baby. Mama will find a way." Still, fear gnawed at her. Singing gigs had dried up lately. The restaurants that once booked her had switched to DJs. The bars now wanted young faces with energy, not soulful voices that made people cry into their drinks. And then there was Ezekiel, the name she tried so hard to forget. A year ago, he had promised her forever. They'd met when she sang at a charity gala for startups. He had stood in the front row, mesmerized, then charmed her with polished compliments and thoughtful gestures. For a while, she believed she had met a man who saw her heart instead of her poverty. But when she told him she was pregnant, everything changed. His smile turned sharp, His words turned cold. You expect me to ruin my name for a singer from Osu, he'd said, his voice like steel. You don't belong in my world, Amara. End it or don't ever contact me again. That was the last time she saw him. Until now. The knock on her door startled her. Amara, a cheerful voice called. It's me! It was Chioma, her best friend since high school, a bright, bubbly woman with cornrow braids and a heart too big for her wallet. She pushed the door open, carrying 2 plastic bags filled with food. You didn't think I'd let you starve, did you? Amara smiled weakly. Chioma, you shouldn't. Don't start, Chioma interrupted, unloading rice, beans, and vegetables onto the table. You're eating for 2. Remember, my future godchild needs proper nutrition. The 2 women laughed softly. For a few moments, the heaviness in the air lifted. They ate together, talking about old times, singing in church, borrowing dresses for school events, dreaming of better days. Then Amara's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello, she answered, cautious. Good afternoon, said a crisp professional voice. Is this Miss Amara Nwosu, the vocalist? Yes, this is she. My name is Patience Okafor. I'm an event planner for high-profile weddings in Accra. I've heard about your performances. I have a job opportunity that might interest you. Amara's heart jumped. I'm listening. I'm organizing a luxury wedding at the Kempinski Hotel, Gold Coast City next month. We need a solo singer for the ceremony and reception. The pay is $3,000. Amara's hand shook. 3,000, yes, Patience replied. We'll cover transportation, wardrobe, and accommodation. I'll send the details via email if you're available. Yes, yes, please, Amara said quickly. Her heart soared. That money could change everything. After the call ended, Chioma squeezed her hand. See, God hasn't forgotten you. Amara smiled through tears. Maybe you're right. She opened her old laptop, waiting for the email to arrive. When it did, she clicked eagerly until her eyes froze on the screen. Wedding performance contract, the marriage of Mr. Ezekiel Owusu and Miss Adana Eze. Her vision blurred, the room tilted. The man who abandoned her was marrying another woman, and she had just accepted a job to sing at his wedding. No, she whispered, slamming the laptop shut as if the words might vanish. No, it can't be. Chioma looked up. What's wrong? Amara's breath came in quick bursts. It's him, Ezekiel. It's his wedding. Chioma's smile vanished. You're joking. Amara reopened the laptop with trembling fingers. The names glowed cruelly on the screen. He hired me. He must have known. The phone buzzed again. A text message from the same planner, Mr. Owusu, personally requested a singer with raw, emotional depth. Your demo was perfect. Please confirm acceptance by tomorrow morning. Amara felt her stomach twist. Raw, emotional depth. Those were his words, the ones he used to describe her voice when he loved her. He knew. Her legs gave way and she sank onto the couch. He wants to humiliate me, she murmured. He wants me to stand on that stage pregnant while he marries her. Chioma's eyes darkened. Then don't go. I can't, Amara whispered. The rent, the baby. Chioma, what choice do I have? Silence hung heavy between them. Then Chioma took her hand firmly. Then you go, she said, but not as a victim. You go as Amara Nwosu, the woman he couldn't destroy. You go, you sing, you earn that money, and you hold your head high. Amara stared at her friend. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of pain, something flickered, something fierce. Maybe Chioma was right. Maybe she couldn't control what Ezekiel planned, but she could control how she responded. She looked down at her belly, feeling the baby move. We'll be okay, she whispered. We'll survive this. That night, while the city of Accra hummed under streetlights, Amara sat by her window, humming softly. The melody came unbidden, haunting and beautiful, a lullaby for strength. She didn't know yet that this song, born of heartbreak and hope, would one day shake the foundations of power itself. 2 sleepless nights passed in Osu. The heat pressed down through the ceiling and the hum of motorbikes along the narrow street refused to die even after midnight. Amara Nwosu lay awake on her thin mattress, the blue glow of her phone screen washing over her tired face. The message from Patience Okafor was still there, polite and poisonous. Please confirm your acceptance by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. Those 2 words sat on her chest like a stone. She turned her face toward the window. Outside, Accra never really slept. The vendors still called out Waki Banku somewhere down the road, and a distant generator coughed out smoke. Amara's hand rested on her belly, feeling a faint kick. You hear that, she whispered to the life inside her. Even the city won't let me rest. The baby kicked again as if to answer. By dawn, Chioma was already knocking at her door. Open up, lazy bones, she called with forced cheer. When Amara opened, her friend stepped in, carrying 2 cups of tea and a paper bag of Kellawell. "Drink," Chioma ordered, setting 1 cup down. "You look like someone who wrestled demons all night." Amara gave a faint smile. "Maybe I did." Chioma sat beside her on the bed. "So, have you decided I can't?" Amara whispered. "Every time I think of standing there in front of him, I can't breathe. But if I refuse, how will I pay rent?" "The landlord already warned me." "And the hospital checkup," Chioma interrupted gently. "You don't need to explain. You're doing what mothers do, choosing survival." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "But it feels like selling my dignity." "No," Chioma said firmly. "It's taking control. He thinks he's writing your humiliation. You're going to rewrite it as your victory." Amara stared into her cup. Steam rose between them like a quiet promise. At noon, she sat at her old wooden desk laptop, open fingers trembling over the keyboard. The cursor blinked on the blank reply. She typed slowly, "Dear Miss Okafor, thank you for this opportunity. I accept the engagement for November 15th at the Kempinski Hotel. Kindly send the full contract and song list. Best regards, Amara Nwosu." Her hand hovered over send for a long time, then she clicked. A soft chime confirmed the message was gone, like releasing a dove into a storm. Later that afternoon, Accra's sky darkened. Clouds swelled above the city, heavy with rain. Amara pulled her threadbare curtain aside and watched lightning flash behind the distant outline of Independence Arch. Her phone buzzed again, a new email from Patience Okafor, attached with documents and a brief note. "Mr. Owusu is particular about professionalism. Kindly arrive at rehearsal on November 10th. Dress code formal." Amara's heart tightened. Mr. Owusu. Even written, his name felt like a wound reopening. She scrolled down through the event plan timings, song suggestions, VIP lists. Her eyes caught one line: special performance solo vocal interlude before signing of marriage certificate. So he wanted her front and center, the perfect moment for his triumph. She pressed her palm against her belly again. "We can do this," she murmured. "We'll sing, we'll earn, and then we'll disappear." The days that followed became a blur of preparation. She borrowed an old keyboard from her church choir and spent hours each evening practicing scales and familiar wedding hymns. But somewhere between Ave Maria and At Last, a new melody began to whisper through her. It started softly, 3 notes that refused to leave her mind. Each night they grew louder, shaping words she didn't mean to write. "You left me standing in the rain, said I was not your kind, but love stayed when pride walked away." Her pen trembled as she scribbled the lines in her notebook. It wasn't revenge, it was truth, pure and unpolished. She didn't even think she'd perform it. It was therapy, a song for the shadows in her heart. Meanwhile, across the city, Ezekiel Owusu was in his element. He stood in the showroom of a luxury car dealer admiring a limited edition Bentley Bentayga, white as polished ivory. The salesman bowed slightly. "Perfect for the wedding convoy, sir. It'll photograph beautifully." Ezekiel smiled. "I'll take 2. When he left, his best friend and college roommate Kwame Asari fell into step beside him. "2 Bentleys, for one day, symbolism," Ezekiel said smoothly. "You don't just marry a woman like Adana Eze, you marry into legacy. Every camera must see that I belong to her world now." Kwame hesitated. "Still, Ezekiel, I heard you hired a singer. Someone from your past." Ezekiel's smile tightened. "Ah, so word spreads. Is it true?" He sipped from a bottle of imported water. "Yes, Amara. She's perfect for the theme, love conquers all." His tone dripped with irony. "She'll sing. I'll stand beside my bride. Everyone will see the difference between who I was and who I am." Kwame frowned. "You're playing with fire, brother. That woman's carrying your child." Ezekiel's expression hardened. "That child isn't mine. She refused my offer to handle things quietly. She made her choice. And you think this will make you look powerful? It will make me look untouchable." Kwame shook his head slowly. "No, it'll make you look empty. Be careful, Ezekiel. The higher you build your tower, the louder it falls." Ezekiel ignored him, slipping into the back seat of his car. He had no time for lectures about morality. Power was his gospel, and this wedding would be his temple. Back in Osu, Amara's life moved in smaller, humbler rhythms. Each morning she visited the market, greeting Mama Afua at the yam stall and trading songs for small discounts. Each evening she sang quietly to her unborn child, using music to steady her heartbeat. But the closer the wedding came, the heavier the air around her grew. She started dreaming of Ezekiel again, his cold eyes, his laughter echoing in marble halls. Sometimes she woke gasping, drenched in sweat. One night, Chioma found her sitting by the window at 2 a.m., staring out at the city lights. "You're not sleeping again." Amara shook her head. "I keep thinking about the moment he sees me. What if I freeze?" Chioma came to stand behind her, resting both hands on her shoulders. "Then breathe. Remember who you are. You are not the woman he left. You are the woman who survived." Amara nodded slowly. "I'll sing for the baby. For truth, not for him." "That's my girl," Chioma said softly. They sat together in silence as rain began to fall, soft, steady cleansing. 5 days later, the first rehearsal email arrived with official documents and a wire transfer receipt, 39000 Ghanaian cedis, half of the payment in advance. Amara stared at the bank notification, her eyes filling with tears. She could pay her rent, she could buy food, she could finally exhale. But even with that relief, her heart remained heavy. The price of peace was standing before the man who had stolen hers. That evening, as she tidied her small room, she whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror, "He thinks I'm broken. Let him look closer. I'm rebuilt." And when she turned away from the mirror, her notebook lay open on the table. The half-finished song waited there like a heartbeat. She picked up her pen, drew a deep breath, and wrote the next line. "You left me, but love stayed." The melody grew stronger, wrapping around her like armor. She didn't know it yet, but those 6 words would echo through Accra, through radio stations, through boardrooms and church pews, long after the wedding day ended. Because truth once sung can never be silenced. The morning breeze rolled through Osu, carrying the faint aroma of roasted corn and sea salt from the coast. Amara Nwosu sat outside her small apartment, her bare feet resting on the cool concrete steps. Across the street, school children in blue uniforms hurried toward the trotro, stopped, their laughter echoing through the narrow lane. Life went on around her, ordinary, noisy, alive, but inside Amara's world had slowed to a heavy silence. She had officially accepted the performance. The down payment from Patience Okafor now sat safely in her bank account, but it brought no peace. Money could fill her belly, yes, but it could not fill the emptiness that Ezekiel's betrayal had carved inside her. She traced her finger along the belly curve beneath her dress. The baby moved a tiny flutter that reminded her why she had to endure this. "Just a few more weeks," she whispered, "then everything will change." "Talking to yourself again," came a familiar voice. Amara looked up to see Chioma carrying a basket of fabrics, balanced effortlessly on her hip. Her friend worked as a part-time tailor, always juggling side hustles to survive. "I brought something," Chioma said, setting the basket down. "A little gift before your rehearsal." Amara frowned playfully. "Another one of your Chioma specials." Of course, Chioma laughed, pulling out a folded gown. "I stitched it myself. Simple but elegant. Blue, your power color." Amara unfolded the fabric. It shimmered in the light, deep sapphire with soft embroidery along the sleeves. Her throat tightened. "Chioma, this is beautiful." Her friend smiled proudly. "I told you, girl, when you walk into that fancy hotel, you won't look like pain, you'll look like purpose." Amara ran her fingers over the fabric. "I don't deserve you." "You deserve more than this city has given you," Chioma replied, her tone soft but firm. "Now tell me, what's your plan? You're not just going there to sing, right?" Amara hesitated. "What do you mean?" Chioma leaned closer. "Ezekiel wants to humiliate you. So, you'll give him a show, but not the one he expects." Amara stared, uncertain. "I'm not trying to fight him." "You don't have to fight," Chioma said. "You just have to stand tall. Let him see that what he threw away didn't break you, turned into gold instead." Amara looked down, tears threatening. "It still hurts, Chioma. When I think about how he looked at me that day like I was trash." Chioma squeezed her hand. "Pain doesn't mean weakness, Amara. It means you cared. But now you'll turn that pain into a weapon, and your voice is the blade." For the first time in weeks, Amara smiled, faint but real. "You sound like one of those motivational preachers on TV. Maybe I should start charging." Chioma teased, then softened. "Promise me one thing when you sing, don't let him see your fear." "I promise." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. The city outside had quieted to a whisper, the hum of distant waves faint through the walls. She lit a candle, opened her worn notebook, and reread the lyrics she'd been writing. "You left me standing in the rain, said I was not your kind, but love stayed when pride walked away." Her pen moved almost on its own, guided by emotion deeper than words. She added a second verse, her handwriting uneven through the tears. "You broke the wings, but I still learned to fly. You called me nothing, yet here I rise." The melody wrapped around her like a heartbeat. She didn't plan to sing it at the wedding. It was too personal, too raw. But something in her chest told her this song was no accident. It was destiny waiting for its stage. When the candle burned low, she placed her hand on her belly again. "You'll hear me sing one day," she murmured. "Not for pain, but for freedom." Across Accra, the Owusu mansion glowed like a palace carved from marble and glass. Servants moved quietly through its hallways, adjusting flower arrangements and polishing silver trays. Ezekiel Owusu sat on his balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand, scrolling through social media articles about his upcoming wedding. Headlines blared Accra's power couple to tie the knot in grand style. He smirked. Everything was going according to plan. Inside, Adana Eze, his bride-to-be, stood before the mirror in her walk-in closet. The silk gown hugged her slender frame perfectly, but her reflection did not smile back. Her mother, Mrs. Easy, stood behind her, adjusting a diamond necklace around her neck. "You'll make headlines, my dear," her mother said proudly. "This marriage will secure your future. The Easy and Owusu names join forever." Adana's voice was soft. "Mama, do you ever wonder if power is enough? If love doesn't matter?" Her mother's expression hardened. "Love fades, child. Security stays. Men respect legacy, not emotions. Remember that." Adana nodded silently, though something in her heart ached. She had watched Ezekiel carefully these past weeks. His charm was flawless, his manners impeccable, but there was a chill in his eyes, as if his heart had forgotten how to feel. As her mother left the room, Adana whispered to her reflection, "Why do I feel like I'm marrying a stranger?" 3 days later, Amara took a trotro to Kempinski Hotel, Gold Coast City, for her first rehearsal. Her stomach churned as she stepped through the grand glass doors, the scent of imported lilies and polished marble overwhelming her senses. The air conditioning cooled her skin instantly, a stark contrast to the heat outside. She spotted Patience Okafor, a tall woman in a burgundy suit, clipboard in hand, directing workers setting up the ballroom. "Miss Nusu, welcome," Patience said warmly. "We're thrilled to have you. Let me introduce you to Mr. Owusu." Amara's heart lurched. She followed her into the ballroom, and there he was. Ezekiel stood near the stage, inspecting flower arrangements like a king surveying his court. His suit was immaculate, his posture proud, his face unreadable. When his eyes met hers, a flicker of surprise crossed his features, then quickly amusement. "Ah," he said smoothly, "the entertainment has arrived." Amara forced a calm smile. "Thank you, Mr. Owusu. I hope to meet your expectations." His lips curved slightly. "I'm sure you will. After all, you always knew how to make a man listen." Patience clapped her hands briskly, breaking the tension. "Shall we start rehearsal?" Amara walked onto the stage, the microphone trembling slightly in her grip. Ezekiel stood below, arms crossed, watching her. For a second, the room faded, the chandeliers, the guests, the planners, all gone. It was just him and her two ghosts from a love that died too early. She took a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice filled the ballroom, smooth, rich, haunting. Even Ezekiel's smirk faltered. The lyrics weren't from her secret song, but they carried something undeniable power. When she finished, silence lingered. Patience clapped first. Beautiful Mr. Owusu. Ezekiel cleared his throat. "Adequate," he said coldly. "We'll keep her." Amara stepped down from the stage, her heart racing but her face calm. As she passed Ezekiel, she whispered softly, just loud enough for him to hear, "You can't break what you didn't build." He froze momentarily, stunned, as she walked away with quiet dignity. That night in her small apartment, Amara couldn't stop trembling. The encounter had reopened wounds she thought had healed. But beneath the pain was a strange new strength. For the first time, she realized he no longer had power over her. Chioma came by with fried plantains and 2 bottles of malt, so she asked eagerly, "How did the rehearsal go?" Amara smiled faintly. "He looked right at me, and I didn't flinch." Chioma raised her bottle. "To strength, to survival," Amara said. They clinked bottles, laughter echoing into the warm Accra night, 2 women sharing hope under a sky that still held stars for them. And somewhere in the distance, on the top floor of his marble tower, Ezekiel stared out over the city lights, his reflection in the window fractured by the glass. For reasons he could not name, the echo of Amara's voice still haunted him. The rain came early that morning in Accra, tapping gently against the metal rooftops of Osu. The city shimmered with puddles, reflections of passing taxis, and neon signs flickering across wet streets. Inside her small apartment, Amara Nwosu sat by the window with a notebook on her lap, her fingers tapping out a rhythm against her belly. Each drop of rain outside seemed to fall in time with her heartbeat. She had not planned to write again, but the melody would not leave her alone. It had followed her from the hotel rehearsal, whispering at the edge of her thoughts. Every note felt like a confession waiting to be sung. On the page before her, she wrote slowly, "When pride built walls, love stayed. When pain was loud, hope prayed." Her pen hovered. The baby kicked softly as if keeping tempo. She smiled faintly and whispered, "You like this one?" In the distance, thunder rolled over the city. A knock at the door startled her. It was Chioma, soaked from the rain, holding a steaming thermos in a paper bag. "Breakfast delivery," she announced, shaking water from her braids. "Kelawele and wakey fuel for genius." Amara laughed. "You're gonna drown one day bringing me food." "Then at least I'll die," full Chioma joked, setting the bag on the table. Her tone softened as she noticed the notebook. "You've been writing again," Amara nodded. "I think I've found it. The song I want to sing at the wedding." Chioma froze mid-bite. "Wait, what? You're not actually planning to perform something new in front of him, are you?" "Yes." "Girl, that man's ego is bigger than the National Theater. If you surprise him, then he'll hear what he's been trying to silence." Amara's voice was calm but resolute. "I'm not doing it for revenge, Chioma. I'm doing it because this song is mine. It's truth. If I sing it there in that place, maybe I'll finally be free." Chioma looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "You really are something, Amara Nwosu." "I'm a mother now," Amara said softly. "I don't have the luxury of silence anymore." That afternoon, she walked to the small recording studio of a local musician, Nana Mensah, a quiet man with dreadlocks and kind eyes, who sometimes let her rehearse for free. "Ah, my star girl," Nana greeted as she entered. Come, what's this new tune I hear you humming around town?" Amara laughed shyly. "You've been hearing things. I hear everything that sounds like pain wrapped in gold," he said, handing her a microphone. "Let's record. The world doesn't wait for courage." She stepped into the booth. The small red light blinked on, and the hum of the equipment faded beneath her first note. Her voice was soft, at first trembling. But as the melody rose, the emotion behind it took over: grief, pride, forgiveness, all blending into something sacred. When she finished, silence filled the room. Nana blinked twice, visibly moved. "That's not a song," he said quietly. "That's a storm with a soul." Amara chuckled nervously. "It's called When Love Stayed." Nana murmured, nodding. "It fits. Promise me you'll protect it. That one's not just yours, it's for every woman who's ever been told she's not enough. I promise." He smiled. "And when the world is ready to listen, you let me produce it properly. We'll make Ghana proud." Amara smiled back. "Deal." Meanwhile, on the other side of Accra, the Easy residents buzzed with wedding preparations. The scent of imported roses and the chatter of stylists filled the air. Adana Easy sat in front of her vanity, her face half-made, half-hidden, behind exhaustion. Her friend Kukua perched nearby, scrolling through Instagram stories. "Girl, your wedding hashtag already has over 3,000 posts, number Owusu Easy Union trending." Adana forced a smile. "That's nice," Kukua frowned. "You don't sound happy." "What's going on?" Adana hesitated, then said quietly. "Do you ever feel like your life isn't yours? Like you're walking down a path someone else built?" Kukua tilted her head. This about Ezekiel Adana didn't answer, but the silence was enough. Her friend sighed. "Look, every man in Accra comes with a warning label. Some are broke, some are players, some are cold. At least yours is rich and handsome." Adana's smile was hollow. "And what if he's all three?" Before Kukua could respond, Mrs. Easy swept into the room. "Adana, the caterers need your approval for tomorrow's menu. And don't slouch, you're representing this family." Adana rose obediently. "Yes, Mama." As they left, the phone on the vanity buzzed a message from an unknown number. "Your groom once called me his forever. See you at the wedding. A.N." Adana stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. She didn't recognize the initials, but something about the tone sent a chill through her. That night, Ezekiel Owusu reviewed the seating arrangements in his penthouse. The guest list was flawless: business leaders, ministers, even a few celebrities. His phone buzzed with a message from Patience Okafor confirming the singer's rehearsal schedule. He smirked. Good. Everything in place. Kofi, his assistant, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, forgive me, but don't you think hiring Miss Nwosu might draw unnecessary attention?" Ezekiel looked up, his tone sharp. "Do you question my decisions now?" "No, sir. She's irrelevant." Ezekiel cut in. A voice. Nothing more. "The past belongs to those who can't afford a future." He turned back to his documents, dismissing Kofi with a wave. But as the door closed, his expression changed. For a fleeting moment, uncertainty crossed his face. A line from her old song, "If you ever lose your way, remember, love knows the road," echoed faintly in his memory. He shook it off with a bitter laugh. "Nostalgia is for the poor," he muttered. Back in Osu, Amara prepared for the next rehearsal. She carefully folded the blue gown Chioma had made and packed her small bag. Her belly had grown heavy now. She moved slower, but her spirit felt lighter. She looked around the room at the cracked walls, the old radio, the notebook on the table. Every corner carried a piece of her struggle, her strength. When Chioma arrived to accompany her to the hotel, Amara took one last look at the room. "Next time I come back," she whispered, "I'll come back free." The next day, the Kempinski ballroom buzzed with decorators and camera crews. Chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and golden drapes framed the massive windows overlooking Independence Avenue. Amara stepped inside quietly, her hands trembling around her microphone case. For a moment she felt small, too small, for a room built to host royalty. But then she remembered Chioma's words, "You're not pain, you're purpose." She walked to the stage. Patience greeted her with a brisk smile. "We'll run through your songs once, Miss Nwosu, and then the final run tomorrow. Mr. Owusu is on his way." As Amara adjusted the microphone, she caught sight of Adana across the room, beautiful, elegant, but with eyes full of questions. Their gazes met briefly and for a second time held its breath. There was something unspoken between them, something neither woman could name. When Ezekiel entered moments later, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations dropped to whispers. He moved through the room like a man certain of his own myth. "Let's begin," he said simply. Amara nodded and lifted the microphone. The music started, soft piano, gentle rhythm. Her voice rose pure and steady, filling the grand hall. Ezekiel's expression remained unreadable, but Adana's eyes glistened. Something in the singer's tone, the honesty, the ache cut through her like glass. When the song ended, polite applause followed. Ezekiel nodded. "Acceptable." "Just remember, Miss Nwosu," he said, his voice laced with arrogance. "This is a celebration, not a confession. Keep your emotions in check." Amara smiled faintly. "Don't worry, Mr. Owusu. I know the difference between performance and truth." As she walked away, Adana watched her go, a knot of unease tightening in her chest. For reasons she couldn't explain, she sensed that this wedding, her wedding, was about to become something far bigger than any of them imagined. And somewhere deep in Amara's soul, a quiet voice whispered, "The stage is set. The storm is coming." The sun climbed high over Accra, gilding the palm trees that lined the avenue outside Kempinski Hotel, Gold Coast City. Wedding preparations were in full swing. Trucks delivered floral arrangements from Aburi Gardens. Chefs shouted orders in the hotel kitchen, and photographers tested their lenses on the crystal chandeliers. Everything shimmered perfect on the surface, like the man who had built it all. Inside one of the hotel's luxury suites, Adana Eze sat in front of the mirror while her stylist pinned the last curl into place. Diamonds glittered in her ears, but her eyes were dim. She looked like a queen about to be crowned, and yet every part of her wanted to run. "Miss Eze," said the stylist, spraying one last cloud of perfume, "you're glowing. The entire country will talk about this wedding for weeks." Adana forced a smile. "That's the idea." Her mother, Mrs. Eze, swept into the room, elegant in a gold lace wrapper and head tie that sparkled under the light. "My daughter," she said, clasping Adana's shoulders. "Today you step into history. You marry not just a man, but an empire." Adana swallowed hard. "Yes, Mama." Mrs. Eze's gaze softened just a little. "I know you're nervous, but remember what I taught you. Love can grow from respect, and respect comes from power." Adana nodded, but her chest felt tight. Her mother's words had been her compass since childhood, but lately that compass seemed to spin in circles. She looked at her reflection again, perfect hair, flawless makeup, eyes that did not look like hers. Somewhere in her mind she heard her father's voice from years ago, before the wealth, before the expectations. "Always choose someone who listens when you're silent." Ezekiel never listened. In another part of the city, Amara Nwosu stood before her mirror in Osu, wearing the sapphire gown Chioma had made for her. The fabric hugged her growing belly, but somehow gave her strength. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, tired, yes, but radiant with quiet defiance. Chioma whistled softly. "If courage had a color, it would be that blue." Amara smiled faintly. "Do you think I'm crazy for going through with this?" Crazy, Chioma laughed. "No. Brave. Absolutely. But promise me one thing, whatever happens, you walk out of that ballroom with your head high." "I will," Amara said, adjusting her earrings. "And after today, I'll never look back." Chioma hugged her tightly. "That's my sister. Now go make the truth sing." Back at the hotel, the ballroom buzzed like a hive of bees. Journalists were setting up cameras. Socialites drifted between tables. A famous gospel choir rehearsed their harmonies. The entire nation's elite seemed to be in attendance. Ezekiel Owusu stood near the stage, dressed in an ivory suit, checking his reflection in a polished tray. He looked every inch the modern king. But beneath his calm exterior, something restless churned. He caught sight of Amara entering through the side door. For a second, he froze. She looked different. Not the fragile girl he'd left behind in Osu. Her steps were steady, her face serene. For the briefest moment, Ezekiel felt an unfamiliar sting shame. No, he told himself, just surprise. He turned to his best man, Kwame Asare, who was adjusting his cufflinks. She's here, Ezekiel muttered. Kwame glanced at Amara. So she is. You sure about this, my friend? You really want her singing here in front of your bride, your investors, the press, everyone? Ezekiel's jaw tightened. She's a performer. This is business. Kwame's brow furrowed. No, Ezekiel. This is pride. And pride doesn't end well. Ezekiel said nothing, only brushed invisible dust from his sleeve. Meanwhile, in the bridal suite, Adana adjusted her veil and glanced at her phone. The message she'd received the night before still glowed on the screen. Your groom once called me his forever. See you at the wedding. A.N. Her stomach twisted. She'd spent half the night trying to make sense of it. Was it a prank, a jealous ex, or something worse? Miss Ease, a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Patience Okafor, clipboard in hand. The singer has arrived. We'll begin the pre-ceremony soon. Adana looked up sharply. Singer, yes. Mr. Owusu personally requested her. She's quite talented. Do you know her name? Patience checked her list. Amara Nwosu. The room tilted. The initials AN suddenly made sense. Adana's breath hitched. She pressed a hand to her chest. Thank you, Patience. That will be all. When the planner left, Adana stared at herself in the mirror, trying to steady her breathing. So it's true. The woman who had messaged her wasn't bluffing, and Ezekiel had invited her here to their wedding. Her first instinct was rage, but it quickly melted into something colder resolve. She wasn't a naive girl to be toyed with. If Ezekiel wanted a performance, he would get one, but not the kind he expected. As the ceremony began, the ballroom filled with the soft hum of conversation. Guests settled into their seats, fanning themselves with golden programs that bore the words, the union of Adana Eze and Ezekiel Owusu, love conquers all. Under the chandeliers, the groom stood tall beside his best man. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered about the guest list. Then the doors opened. The bridal march began. Adana appeared moving gracefully down the aisle in her sparkling gown. Every step felt like walking through fire, but she kept her head high. Her smile was delicate but controlled. When she reached the altar, Ezekiel took her hand. His grip was firm, rehearsed. You look perfect, he murmured. So do you, she replied evenly, her eyes searching his face for truth and finding none. The ceremony unfolded like a fairy tale. The officiant spoke of love, unity, and destiny. The audience sighed in admiration. But under the perfect rhythm of the event, tension coiled tight as a drum. Then came the moment everyone awaited, the song. Patience Okafor stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest performer, the talented Amara Nwosu. Applause rippled through the hall as Amara walked onto the stage. She bowed slightly to the crowd, her blue gown shimmering under the lights. From where she stood, she could see everything, the sea of elegant faces, the massive floral arch, the man who had once promised her forever. Ezekiel's smirk flickered when their eyes met. Dance for me, his expression seemed to say. Let them see who you really are. But Amara didn't flinch. She adjusted the microphone and took a deep breath. The first chords began to play, not the rehearsed ballad Ezekiel had approved, but something new. A hush fell over the room. Her voice rose soft but unbreakable. You said love was a storm to survive, but I was the rain that made you bloom. You built your throne on broken hearts, but truth always finds its tune. The lyrics hit the air like lightning. Guests exchanged puzzled looks. The bride's eyes widened. Ezekiel's smirk vanished. Amara's voice grew stronger, trembling with raw emotion. You left me with silence, but love stayed. You tried to erase me, but grace remained. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adana's gaze moved from Amara to Ezekiel, realization dawning like a dawn that burned. Ezekiel stepped forward, his voice a harsh whisper. Stop this. But Amara kept singing. The final verse rang through the hall. You can cage the singer, not the song, and even power must bow to wrong. When the last note faded, the silence was deafening. Then somewhere in the back, a single pair of hands began to clap. Then another. Soon the entire ballroom erupted into applause, not polite, but thunderous. Some stood, others shouted her name. Adana looked at Ezekiel, tears streaming down her face, not from sorrow, but fury. You brought her here to humiliate her, she said quietly, but she just revealed who the real fool is. She turned toward Amara, who stood trembling on the stage. For a long moment their eyes met, one woman betrayed, one redeemed. Then Adana did something no one expected. She placed the pen meant for the marriage certificate on the table and said, clear enough for the cameras to hear, "This wedding is over." The crowd gasped. Ezekiel's face went pale. And as the hall dissolved into chaos, reporters shouting, guests whispering, Amara stepped back from the microphone, tears glistening on her cheeks. She didn't look at Ezekiel again. She didn't need to. Her truth had already been sung. The ballroom that had moments ago shimmered with chandeliers and applause now pulsed with chaos. The air smelled of roses and scandal. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Guests murmured in disbelief as Adana Ize, the bride, stood frozen before the altar veil, trembling eyes burning with betrayal. Across the marble floor, Ezekiel Owusu tried to regain control. His jaw tightened as he turned to the officiant. Continue, he ordered, his voice low but shaking. Adana stepped back. There's nothing to continue, Ezekiel. This, she gestured to the crowd, the cameras, the stage. This is the truth you tried to hide. Don't embarrass yourself, he hissed. We'll talk later. She laughed bitterly. You brought her here to humiliate her, and you thought the world wouldn't find out. The murmurs in the audience grew louder. Someone whispered, he cheated. Another gasped, she's pregnant. Ezekiel's face flushed crimson. Everyone calm down, he said through clenched teeth, forcing a smile toward the cameras. There's been a misunderstanding, Adana cut him off. The only misunderstanding is that I believed you were capable of love. Gasps rippled again. Ezekiel reached for her wrist, but she pulled away sharply. The gesture was caught by every camera in the room. Amara stood motionless on stage, her microphone still in hand. The blue gown glowed under the lights, her tears glinting like glass. For a fleeting second, her instinct was to run. But she stayed. The truth was finally free, and she would not hide from it. Adana turned to her, her voice steady but raw. You don't need to say anything. You've already said it all. Their eyes met, two women on opposite ends of the same heartbreak. For the first time, neither saw the other as an enemy. Minutes later, the ceremony disintegrated. Guests scattered. The press swarmed. Kwame Asare, Ezekiel's best man, tried to usher him out through a side door, but microphones and questions closed in like a storm. Mr. Owusu, is it true? You had a child with the performer, Mr. Owusu. Were you unfaithful? Miss Nwosu, how long were you together? Ezekiel's teeth clenched. No comment, he snapped, pushing past the cameras. But the more he resisted, the more they followed. Adana, escorted by her father, left through another exit. Her mother trailed behind, humiliated but silent. Even in disgrace, Adana's head remained high. The bride, who was supposed to be a symbol of power, now walked away from it all into freedom. Back inside the ballroom, Amara sat in a corner trembling. Chioma burst in moments later, breathless from rushing through the security guards. Amara, are you okay? Amara looked up, dazed. I didn't mean for this to happen. Of course you didn't, Chioma said, wrapping her arms around her. But maybe it needed to. I just wanted to sing the truth, Amara whispered. Not destroy lives. Chioma pulled back gently. Sweetheart, lies destroy themselves. You just gave them a voice. Amara let out a shaky breath. Around them, hotel staff hurried to clear overturned chairs and spilled champagne. The orchestra quietly packed their instruments, avoiding her gaze. Then Nana Mensah, the producer who had helped her record, appeared at the doorway. Amara, he called softly. I saw the live stream. That was unbelievable. Amara flinched. Unbelievable, in a good way or bad way. In both, he admitted, his lips curving into a faint smile. The internet is already exploding. You're trending across Ghana. The truth singer. That's what they're calling you. Chioma's mouth dropped open. Trending. She just burned down a billionaire's wedding, and she's trending, Nana chuckled. Sometimes justice goes viral. Amara covered her face with her hands. Oh God, Nana knelt beside her. Listen to me, that song, When Love Stayed, it's not just a performance anymore, it's an anthem. You have to release it properly. People need to hear it. Amara shook her head. I can't think about that now. Not today? Then think about tomorrow, Nana said gently. Because tomorrow you'll wake up to a new world, one where your voice matters. Meanwhile, in the parking lot behind the hotel, Ezekiel ripped off his bow tie and slammed his fist against his car door. His assistant, Kofi, flinched. "Sir, please, there are cameras outside." "Let them film," Ezekiel roared. "Let them see what this city does to men who build everything." Kwame stepped forward. "This isn't about the city, Ezekiel. This is about you." Ezekiel turned, eyes blazing. "You think I deserve this humiliation?" "After everything I've built," Kwame met his gaze calmly. "Yes, you treated people like tools, and you forgot tools don't sing back." For a moment, Ezekiel looked ready to strike him, but instead he slumped against the car, chest heaving. The first drops of rain began to fall again, tapping against the hood like a slow applause from heaven. Hours later, the headlines spread like wildfire across every platform in Ghana and beyond. Billionaire groom exposed during his own wedding. Singer's truth anthem ends high society marriage live on camera. A number when love stayed. Trending #1 inch Africa. Clips of Amara's performance flooded TikTok and Instagram. Her voice, aching and beautiful, echoed across millions of screens. Some called her brave. Others called her reckless. But no one called her invisible anymore. In Osu, Amara sat on her couch, phone buzzing nonstop. Messages poured in from journalists, producers, and strangers across the world. "You gave me strength. Your song saved me from giving up. I cried watching you sing." Chioma scrolled through the comments, her eyes wide. "Girl, you're a legend." Amara shook her head. "I'm just tired." "Then rest," Chioma said softly. "You've earned it." Amara leaned back, hand resting on her belly. The baby kicked again, strong, rhythmic. She smiled faintly. Maybe the world was meant to hear this song. But not everyone celebrated. In the penthouse overlooking Accra, Ezekiel sat alone in darkness. His phone rang endlessly, board members, sponsors, investors. He ignored them all. The television in the corner replayed the viral clip of Amara's performance. Her voice filled the empty room, weaving through the shadows. "You can cage the singer, not the song." He grabbed the remote and hurled it at the screen. Glass shattered. Still, her voice lingered, soft and haunting. For the first time, the silence felt unbearable. He poured himself another drink, staring out the window at the city lights. Down there, people were laughing, sharing memes, gossiping about his downfall. Everything he'd built was crumbling, and yet what hurt most wasn't the scandal. It was the memory of her face glowing beneath the chandeliers, fearless. He whispered to the empty room, "You won, Amara. But what now?" The next morning, Accra woke to sunshine and headlines. Street vendors blared radios replaying When Love Stayed. Taxi drivers hummed along. Office workers watched the clip on their phones. At a cafe near Labadi Beach, Nana Mensah met Amara and Chioma. The place was quiet, the sea breeze soft against their faces. "I uploaded a clean version of your performance," Nana said. Within hours, record labels from Lagos and Nairobi were calling. "Everyone wants to sign you." Amara blinked, stunned. "Record labels, yes," Nana said, smiling. "But I told them no for now. You need rest. Then we'll do this properly." Chioma grinned. Imagine that, Amara Nwosu, the woman who sang Truth to Power. Amara sipped her tea, eyes distant. "I didn't want power. I just wanted peace." Nana nodded. "And sometimes peace only comes after the storm." They watched the waves for a moment, silent. In the distance, children played near the shore, their laughter carried on the wind. Amara placed her hand over her belly, whispering, "We're okay now, little one. We made it." Chioma smiled gently. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" Amara looked out at the horizon where sunlight met the sea. "No," she admitted, "but I'll face it, because love stayed." And somewhere in the city, in a penthouse that now felt like a prison, Ezekiel Owusu listened to that same song playing faintly through his shattered television. He didn't drink. He didn't move. He just sat there alone with the echo of a truth he could no longer escape. The rain had washed Accra clean by nightfall. The streets glistened like black glass beneath flickering streetlights, and the scent of wet earth mingled with the smoky sweetness of grilled corn. From the balcony of a modest guest house near Labadi Beach, Amara Nwosu watched the tide roll in her hands, cradling a mug of ginger tea. Every wave felt like a heartbeat of the city, strong, endless, alive. It had been 2 days since the wedding, 2 days since the world learned her name. Yet peace still felt fragile, like the silence that follows a storm. The internet was still burning with her story. Journalists still begged for interviews. Strangers still left flowers outside her small gate in Osu. She had moved here to this quiet beachside guest house for a few days of air and distance. Her phone buzzed again. Chioma's name flashed across the screen. "Girl, you're still alive," came her friend's teasing voice. "The world's losing its mind out here," You're all over BBC Africa, CNN, and even TikTok Ghana, Amara chuckled softly. And what are they saying that your song is the new anthem for women everywhere? Even the church choir in Kumasi performed it during Sunday service. Amara laughed despite herself. That's impossible. I'm serious, Nana just sent me the video. The whole congregation singing When Love Stayed like it was a hymn. I told you unleashed something bigger than you. Her laughter faded into a sigh. Bigger than me, maybe, but also heavier. Chioma's tone softened. You sound tired. I am. Fame feels strange. I never wanted to be a symbol, Chioma. I just wanted to survive. Maybe that's exactly why people love you, Chioma said. You didn't sing for power, you sang for truth. And truth is starving in this world. There was silence on the line for a moment, broken only by the sound of the sea. Then Chioma added, by the way, did you hear Ezekiel was removed as CEO this morning? Amara froze. What his board met without him. They released a statement saying he's taking an indefinite leave for personal reasons. But everyone knows what that means. Amara closed her eyes, the words sinking like stones in her chest. She didn't rejoice. She didn't gloat. She simply whispered, It's over then. Maybe not yet, Chioma said carefully. He's still powerful. Men like him don't vanish, they rebuild. Just promise me you won't answer his calls if he ever tries. Amara smiled faintly. Don't worry, there's nothing left to say. Meanwhile, across town, Ezekiel Owusu sat in his penthouse, surrounded by silence. The servants were gone. His phone lay face down, battery dead. The headlines had been merciless. Owusu ousted after wedding scandal. His sponsors had pulled out, his investors had fled, and his name, once synonymous with power, was now a punchline whispered in Accra cafes. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window staring out at the city he once ruled. The skyline shimmered under the moonlight, but it felt foreign now, like a country that no longer recognized him. He hadn't eaten all day, he barely slept. All he did was replay the moment Amara's voice filled the ballroom, the way her song had stripped him bare before the world. He had spent years building walls of arrogance, and with a single melody, she had torn them down. For the first time, he wondered if he had mistaken strength for cruelty. His mother's voice, long buried in memory, returned. Power without kindness is just loneliness in disguise. He sank into a chair, hands clutching his head. For the first time since he was a boy, Ezekiel Owusu wept, not out of anger but regret. At dawn, the horizon burned orange over the Gulf of Guinea. Amara walked barefoot along the wet sand, the hem of her gown brushing the surf. A soft wind played with her braids and gulls wheeled overhead. She had always loved mornings the way they promised a clean slate, no matter how heavy the night before. She found a quiet spot and sat watching fishermen push their canoes into the tide. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Then a shadow fell over the sand beside her. Amara. Her body stiffened. The voice was unmistakable. She turned slowly. Ezekiel stood a few feet away, dressed simply in a dark shirt and trousers, the arrogance stripped from his posture. He looked older, haunted, almost fragile. How did you find me? She asked quietly. Chioma, he admitted. I begged her. She didn't want to tell me, but I told her I just needed one conversation. Amara exhaled sharply. She shouldn't have. He nodded. You're right. But please just listen. There was no crowd here, no camera, no power imbalance. Just two people barefoot in the sand, ghosts of their past between them. Ezekiel's voice cracked. I watched the video 100 times. The way you sang, it wasn't revenge. It was mercy. You could have ruined me, Amara, but instead you reminded me of what I used to be. She stared out at the sea. You ruined yourself, Ezekiel. I only told the truth. He nodded again, swallowing hard. I know, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But I had to see you to say I'm sorry. Not for the wedding, not for the scandal, for everything, for leaving you when you needed me most. Her throat tightened. For years she had imagined this moment, his apology, his regret. But now that it was here, it felt hollow, like the echo of a prayer said too late. You broke more than my heart, she said softly. You broke the part of me that believed love meant safety. I had to rebuild from ashes, and I did without you. He looked down. I see that now. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. The wind carried the sound of the waves between them. For a moment they were both silent, two people mourning what could never be. Finally Ezekiel said, I'm leaving Ghana. The board made their decision, and honestly, maybe it's for the best. I've lost everything that mattered, but maybe that's the price of remembering what matters most. Amara looked at him, her expression unreadable. And what is that? He met her eyes. The truth. For the first time she saw sincerity there, not arrogance, not calculation, just a man finally stripped of his illusions. Good, she said quietly. Then maybe you can start over. But don't build another empire on someone else's pain. He nodded slowly. I won't. Ezekiel took a hesitant step closer. Can I at least meet my child? Her hand instinctively rested on her belly. The baby shifted as if listening. When she's old enough to understand, Amara said. Not now. He nodded, accepting the sentence. Then, goodbye, Amara. She turned back to the sea. Goodbye, Ezekiel. He walked away the sand, swallowing his footprints until they vanished completely. Later that morning, Amara returned to her guest house. Nana Mensah was waiting in the courtyard holding a newspaper. Did you see? He asked, smiling. They're calling your performance the song that shook Accra. Every station wants to interview you. Amara smiled faintly. Let them wait. I'm not ready to talk. I'm still learning to breathe. Nana nodded. Understandable. But I've been thinking, we could record When Love Stayed, properly release it worldwide. Not for money, but for message. Amara thought for a moment, then she smiled. Let's do it, but on one condition. What's that? It has to help someone. Every profit goes to single mothers who've been abandoned like me. Nana's grin widened. You're a rare kind of star, Amara. The kind that lights others. She laughed softly. Stars don't light themselves, Nana. They burn. That evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat by the window with Chioma, watching the sky blush purple. So Chioma said, what's next for Accra's most famous woman? Amara smiled. Maybe rest. Maybe recording. Maybe motherhood. But whatever comes, I'll walk toward it without fear. Chioma raised her cup. To new beginnings. Amara clinked hers against it. To truth that stays. They drank the laughter between them, light and easy. Outside, the sea hummed against the shore, carrying away the last fragments of the storm. And somewhere miles away on a quiet flight leaving Kotoka International Airport, Ezekiel Owusu looked out the window at the fading lights of Accra. In his ears played a familiar voice, her voice singing from a recording he had downloaded before deleting everything else. He closed his eyes. The lyrics wrapped around him like a prayer. You left me, but love stayed. For the first time, he whispered the words back. Love stayed. And for both of them, the long night finally gave way to dawn. The morning sun spread gold across the rooftops of Accra, and a gentle sea breeze drifted through the open studio windows of Nana Mensah Records. The scent of coffee and new beginnings lingered in the air. Amara Nwosu stood before the microphone, headphones pressed against her ears, one hand resting on her belly. The small studio lights reflected in her eyes like twin flames, steady, alive, unafraid. This was it. The official recording of When Love Stayed. Behind the soundboard, Nana adjusted the levels, his dreadlocks tied back with a bandana. We'll take it slow, Amara. The world already knows the song today. We make them feel it. Amara nodded. I'm ready. The soft hum of piano filled the room. She closed her eyes and let the first line rise like breath from her chest. Her voice was gentle but full of weight, the kind of sound that carried a story. You left me standing in the rain, but I danced anyway. Each lyric glided through the speakers, warm and raw. By the time she reached the chorus, Nana had stopped adjusting the controls. He simply sat there watching a woman who had turned her pain into power. When the last note faded, silence fell, the kind that carries reverence. Nana exhaled. That was lightning in sound. Amara smiled, wiping a tear. Maybe it's not lightning, Nana. Maybe it's healing. He nodded slowly. Healing for you, for others too. I'll have it mixed and ready for release in 48 hours. Amara looked out the window where the streets below pulsed with life, vendors calling out tro-tros, honking, children laughing in the distance. 48 hours, she whispered. Let's see what love can really do. 2 days later, When Love Stayed dropped across streaming platforms. Within hours, it exploded. The song swept through Ghana like a wind that refused to die, played in taxis and salons, on street corners and church radios. The melody found its way into homes that had never heard her name, into hearts that didn't know her story but understood her truth. Social media filled with videos of people singing along. Mothers rocked their babies to the rhythm. Teenagers danced barefoot in their yards. Pastors quoted her lyrics in sermons about forgiveness. Even the newspapers called it the anthem of healing. For Amara, it was surreal. She watched the world move to her voice, yet her own days stayed humble. She still cooked rice and beans on her small stove, still folded baby clothes in the evening, still talked to Chioma about hospital bills and cravings. Fame had found her, but she refused to let it consume her. At the same time, far from the noise, Ezekiel Owusu was rebuilding a different life. He had left Accra, quietly choosing to stay for a few weeks in Takoradi, where no one cared about headlines or scandals. He rented a small seaside bungalow, traded his suits for simple shirts, and spent long hours walking along the shore thinking he had sold a portion of his shares in Owusu Tech. The rest he placed in a trust for future educational programs, the first sign that he was learning humility. For once, there were no assistants, no security details, no photographers, just silence and consequence. Every evening he'd play Amara's song from his phone, the one melody he couldn't escape. You can cage the singer, not the song. At first it haunted him. Later it humbled him. Eventually it healed him. One evening while helping an old fisherman repair his net, the man said, "You look like someone who's lost everything." Ezekiel smiled faintly. "Maybe I have." The fisherman shrugged. "Then you're free." People with nothing left to prove finally learn how to live. For the first time in months, Ezekiel laughed not bitterly but softly. "Maybe you're right." In Osu, the world around Amara began to shift faster than she could comprehend. Invitations poured in, TV interviews, live concerts, endorsements, yet she said no to most. She wanted to protect the purity of the song before the world turned it into entertainment. Nana often teased her. "You do realize you could be the next Yemi Alade, right?" "I don't want to be famous," Amara said. "I want to be useful." And she was. Within weeks, she started a foundation, the Love State Initiative, supporting single mothers across Ghana. She used part of the royalties to buy sewing machines for women in Jamestown and to cover school fees for girls in Nima. Her first public appearance after the wedding scandal was not on a red carpet but in a small community hall filled with mothers and children. She stood before them holding her now round belly and said, "They called me the truth singer, but really I'm just one of you. I was afraid I was forgotten, but love stayed. And if it stayed for me, it can stay for you too." The applause that followed was not the roar of fame, but the warm human sound of shared survival. Weeks turned into months. The harm of the past softened into distant memory. Then one afternoon, as Accra shimmered under a sky of pale blue, the first contractions came. Kioma rushed her to Korlebu Teaching Hospital, holding her hand through each wave of pain. Nurses moved quickly, voices gentle and reassuring. After hours of labor, two small cries split the air, twin girls perfect and whole. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks as she held them close. Hope she whispered to the first. "Faith," she said to the second, "you are my miracle songs." Chioma wiped her own tears. "They're beautiful, Amara. They have your strength." Outside the hospital room, cameras waited, fans gathered, but Amara's world had narrowed to the soft rhythm of her daughter's breathing. For the first time, the word peace wasn't just a dream, it was here in her arms. The next morning, a bouquet arrived at her bedside. Simple white lilies tied with a card. There was no name, only a note, written in clean, familiar handwriting. "For hope and faith, may they never grow up in silence. E.O." Amara stared at the note for a long moment. There was no bitterness in her chest, only quiet understanding. She folded it carefully and tucked it inside her journal. When Chioma noticed, she asked, "Was that from who I think it was?" Amara nodded. "Yes, and I think that's enough." Months passed. Accra moved on as cities always do, but Amara's name remained not as scandal but as song. Her album, The Truth That Stayed, debuted across Africa, blending traditional Ghanaian rhythms with soulful lyrics about forgiveness, resilience, and motherhood. Critics praised it as the most honest album of the decade. At her first live concert held at Independence Square, tens of thousands gathered beneath the night sky. Lanterns floated upward as she stepped onto the stage, her twins safe backstage with Chioma. She looked out at the sea of faces, women, men, children, and felt the weight of the journey that had brought her here. "This song," she said into the microphone, "belongs to everyone who ever thought love left them behind." The music began, the crowd swayed, and when she sang the chorus, the entire square joined in, thousands of voices rising together under the stars. "You left me, but love stayed." Her voice broke for a moment, overwhelmed. She thought of the girl she once was, the woman she had become, and even the man who had once broken her, all threads of a story that had found its melody. At the far edge of the crowd, half hidden beneath a cap, Ezekiel Owusu stood silently, his eyes glistening. He didn't try to speak. He didn't try to be seen. He simply listened the way a man does when he finally understands what it means to love without owning. When the final note faded, the night erupted in applause. Amara smiled through her tears and whispered into the microphone, "Love stayed." And somewhere in the audience, Ezekiel whispered it back. The Harmattan winds had begun to blow again, carrying dust and memory across Accra. The city shimmered under a pale morning sun, but life had changed since the night when Love Stayed filled Independence Square. The song had become more than music, it was a quiet revolution. In salons, in trotros, and markets, women hummed it while braiding hair or weighing tomatoes. Even school children recited the lyrics during morning assembly. Yet for Amara Nwosu, fame had never been the goal. Her mornings still began the same way, feeding her twin girls hope and faith and talking to Chioma over steaming bowls of porridge. The babies were 6 months old now, bright-eyed and endlessly curious. Chioma placed Faith on her lap and grinned. "You realize your daughters already have fan clubs, right? That one video of Hope clapping along to your rehearsal hit 500,000 views overnight." Amara rolled her eyes, laughing. "Don't remind me. I'm still trying to figure out how a baby can trend." Chioma laughed too, then grew more serious. "You've built something special, Amara. The Love Stayed Foundation is feeding families, building classrooms, and paying hospital bills. You're not just a singer anymore, you're a movement." Amara paused, looking out the window where the city stretched wide beneath the morning haze. "Maybe that's the real song," she murmured. "Not the one I sing, but the lives that sing because of it." Chioma smiled softly. "Still, you need to rest sometimes, superstar." Amara chuckled. "Tell that to 2 hungry babies." Later that afternoon, Amara drove to the foundation's new office near Atabraka. The building was small, but painted a warm shade of coral with murals of mothers and children across its outer walls. Inside, volunteers sorted food parcels, while others organized scholarship lists. The hum of purpose filled every corner. She walked through the hallways, greeting everyone by name, Morning Kwesi. "How's your mother's surgery, Ahmadid? We get more sewing machines from the donors in Tema." Her assistant, a young man named Benedict, approached holding a tablet. "Madam Amara, we've received an invitation from the Ministry of Culture. They want you to perform at the National Arts Gala next month." Amara blinked. "The one broadcast across all of West Africa?" "Yes. It's the biggest event of the year. Heads of state will attend." She hesitated, feeling that old tension in her chest. Once the idea of a crowd had terrified her. Now she'd faced millions, but still performing before politicians and dignitaries meant returning to the center of power she'd once escaped. "Tell them I'll think about it," she said finally. Benedict nodded. "Of course, madam." As he walked away, Amara ran her fingers along a framed photo on the wall, a group of single mothers from Jamestown smiling as they held sewing kits, the Love Stayed logo behind them. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "For every woman told she cannot rise." That was enough stage for her, she thought. Enough applause, but destiny, it seemed, wasn't done singing her name. Meanwhile, across the city, Ezekiel Owusu returned quietly to Accra. It had been nearly a year since his disappearance from public life. His hair was shorter now, flecked with early gray. The arrogance that once defined him had faded, replaced by a quiet weariness and a clarity that came only after losing everything. He stepped out of the taxi near Ridge Church and walked down the street toward a small building with a banner that read Owusu Youth Code Initiative. Inside, teenagers huddled around computers, their faces lit by the glow of learning. "Mr. Owusu," a boy called out. "The coding program is full. We need more laptops." Ezekiel smiled faintly. "Then we'll get more. Every child here deserves a screen, not just a dream." He had started the program with what little money remained from his savings, teaching young people from low-income neighborhoods about technology and business ethics, something he had once ignored himself. That evening after the students left, he sat alone in the quiet office, scrolling through his phone. His fingers paused over a news article, Amara Nwosu's Foundation expands to Nigeria. Her photo filled the screen, still radiant, still strong. He whispered softly to himself, "You kept your promise. You made the pain mean something." He wanted to message her to say he had changed. But some silences are sacred, and he chose to keep it that way. Weeks passed. One evening as dusk fell over Accra, Amara sat by the beach near Labadi with her daughters asleep in their stroller. The sea was calm, the horizon painted in amber. Beside her, Nana Mensah strummed his guitar softly. "Remember when you recorded your first song?" he asked. Amara smiled. "You mean the one I couldn't sing without crying?" "Exactly," he said, laughing. "Now look at you, International Awards Foundation, 2 babies and still humble." "Maybe humility is just another word for survival," she said quietly. Nana nodded. "And forgiveness?" Amara looked toward the ocean. "That's just freedom wearing softer clothes." He stopped playing for a moment. "You heard about the National Arts Gala I did. You're going right. Ghana needs to see you on that stage again. The country remembers who you are, Amara. Don't hide the gift." She smiled faintly. "I'll think about it." But that night, when the girls were asleep, she watched old videos of her performance from the wedding the night everything began. She saw the fear in her eyes then, and the fire that followed. Maybe it was time to stand in that fire again, but this time by choice. A month later, the National Arts Gala filled the National Theatre of Ghana with light and applause. The red carpet gleamed. Camera flashes burst like fireworks. Ministers, musicians, and actors filled the hall. When Amara's name was announced, the audience rose in thunderous applause. Dressed in a flowing white gown, she stepped onto the stage, her daughters watching from the wings with Chioma. She smiled into the microphone. "A year ago, I thought music had destroyed me. Today, I know it saved me. This song is for everyone who has ever been broken but chose to heal louder than they were hurt." The first notes of When Love Stayed played this time backed by a full orchestra. Her voice, seasoned by motherhood and grace, carried even deeper now, like a river that had learned patience. The crowd listened in reverent silence. When she reached the final verse, "You left me, but love stayed," many in the audience wept openly. Among them, unnoticed in the last row of the balcony, sat Ezekiel. He had not planned to attend, but something inside him had drawn him here to witness, not to be seen. When her voice filled the hall, his heart clenched. It wasn't guilt anymore, it was gratitude. When the performance ended, the entire theater stood in ovation. Amara bowed, tears shining on her cheeks. Backstage reporters clamored for interviews, but she slipped away quietly into the corridor where her daughters waited. Chioma wrapped her in a hug. "You did it again." Amara smiled through her tears. "No, we did." That night, as Accra's skyline sparkled beneath the stars, Ezekiel walked home alone along the Independence Avenue. He passed by a billboard lit by soft golden light. It showed Amara holding her twins, the slogan beneath reading, "Love stayed. So can hope." He stopped for a moment, then smiled, really smiled for the first time in years. Somewhere behind him, the wind carried faint echoes of her song. And though their lives now ran on separate paths, both knew the same truth. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion, it means release. For Amara, it meant peace. For Ezekiel, it meant redemption. And for Accra, it meant remembering that even in a world built on noise, a single voice could still change the rhythm of everything. The morning after the National Arts Gala, the city of Accra glowed with pride. Newspaper vendors shouted headlines at every corner. Amara Nosu brings Ghana to tears, a song that united a nation when love stayed. The voice of Africa's heart. The air buzzed with admiration, as if the entire country had exhaled together after a long-held breath. But inside her quiet home in Osu, Amara sat by the window feeding little hope, while faith slept peacefully beside her. Fame might have filled the streets, but her world was still wrapped in small, sacred moments. The laughter of her daughters, the smell of morning porridge, the hum of a distant radio playing her own voice. Chioma burst through the door holding a tablet. "You won't believe this," she exclaimed. "The African Union just announced that you've been invited to perform at the Pan-African Women's Summit in Addis Ababa next month. They called your song a hymn of resilience." Amara blinked in disbelief. "Addis Ababa, me, yes you," Chioma laughed, lifting hope into her arms. "You've gone from heartbreak to headlines, my sister. The whole continent wants to hear you sing." Amara smiled, but quietly. "It's beautiful, but also terrifying." Chioma tilted her head. "You're still afraid. I'm not afraid of singing," Amara said softly. "I'm afraid of losing what made the song real. Pain taught me honesty. But now, my life is full of peace. Can I still sing truth when the storm is gone?" Chioma took her hand. "You don't have to keep bleeding to tell your story. Joy can be truth too." Amara looked down at her daughters, their tiny hands curling in sleep. "Maybe you're right," she murmured. "Maybe love stayed so that peace could have a song too." Meanwhile, across the city, Ezekiel Owusu sat in a small classroom at the Owusu Youth Code Initiative Center. Around him, rows of teenagers typed on second-hand laptops, learning the basics of programming. The once mighty CEO now wore a plain shirt and jeans, chalk dust clinging to his hands. "Remember," he said to the class, "success isn't power, it's purpose. And purpose means using what you know to lift others, not yourself." The students nodded, hanging on his every word. To them, he wasn't a disgraced billionaire. He was a mentor who understood failure and redemption. When the lesson ended, a young girl approached shyly. "Sir," she said, "is it true you used to be one of the richest men in Ghana?" Ezekiel smiled faintly. "Once. But I learned something richer than money." "What's that?" He looked out the window at the dusty street, where sunlight touched the worn sign of the center. "The sound of forgiveness," he said quietly. That evening, as he closed the classroom and stepped into the fading light, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Nana Mensah, the producer. "Amara's performing in Addis next month. The summit invited you too as part of the Ghanaian delegation on youth development. Seems life still writes strange duets, eh? Ezekiel stared at the message for a long time. Fate, it seemed, wasn't finished weaving their names together. He typed back simply, "Maybe it's time to listen one last time." A few weeks later, Ethiopia's capital bloomed with flags and color. Delegates from across Africa filled the Grand Hall of the African Union headquarters, where banners celebrated women, leaders, innovators, and artists. Backstage, Amara adjusted the scarf draped across her white dress. The twins were back in Accra with Chioma, and the quiet before her performance felt heavier than ever. Nana placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Ready," she smiled nervously. "As ready as a mother of twins can be." "You've faced worse storms," he said gently. "This one's just light." She took a deep breath, stepping toward the stage. The lights dimmed. A soft hush fell over the audience. Then the spotlight bloomed, revealing her silhouette. She began with a simple hum, no instruments, just voice. The melody filled the hall like sunrise breaking through glass. "When the road forgot my name, love stayed. When the world turned away, love stayed." And when the silence became too loud to bear, Grace whispered, "I'm still here." The crowd was spellbound. Some wept, others closed their eyes. Ministers and artists alike sat in awe. And as she reached the final chorus, her voice trembled not from fear but from gratitude. "You can lose your crown, your home, your way, but love will stay, love will stay." When she finished, the hall erupted into applause. People rose to their feet, clapping until their hands ached. And in the front row, Ezekiel stood silently, eyes glistening. He had arrived with the Ghanaian youth delegation quietly seated in the back. But as the audience rose, he found himself drawn forward almost unconsciously, until he stood among the standing crowd. For a brief moment, their eyes met. No anger, no longing. Only recognition, the quiet kind that comes when two people finally forgive themselves. Afterward, in the corridor outside the hall, Amara walked alone toward the exit, her scarf fluttering in the air. A familiar voice stopped her. "Amara." She turned. He stood there, hands in pockets, uncertain. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your song, it healed more than you know." Amara smiled gently. "And your silence did too." They both laughed quietly at that. Ezekiel glanced at her with a bittersweet smile. "You look happy." "I am." He nodded. "Good. You deserve every dawn." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "And you deserve peace. Have you found it?" "Almost," he replied. "Still learning how to stay humble enough to keep it." A pause. "Ezekiel," she said softly, "sometimes losing everything is how we learn what's worth keeping." He smiled, eyes wet. "And you kept love." She tilted her head. "No love kept me." For a while they stood there in the gentle hum of the summit's corridor, not as lovers, not as enemies, but as two souls who had finally made peace with the past. Then Amara took a step forward and offered her hand. "Goodbye, Ezekiel." He took it, holding it briefly before letting go. "Goodbye, Amara." And just like that, their story, once tangled in betrayal and pride, found its final verse. Not tragedy, but closure. Months later, Accra awoke to new beginnings once again. The Love Stayed Foundation had expanded across 3 countries. Amara's song had become part of school curriculums, teaching children about courage and empathy. In Osu, hope and faith toddled through the living room, clutching wooden toys. Chioma watched them fondly. "They've got your energy," she said. Amara laughed. "And their father's stubbornness." Chioma arched a brow. "You mean the ex-father who was taught a lesson by God himself?" Amara chuckled. "That one." Then, as the twins played, the radio announced breaking news. The Owusu Youth Code Initiative partners with the Love Stayed Foundation to expand digital literacy for girls. Chioma blinked. "Wait," he reached out. Amara nodded. "He wrote me last month. Not for apology, just collaboration. And it felt right. Sometimes the best way to forgive is to build something better together." Chioma smiled slowly. "Maybe the story isn't over after all." Amara looked toward the open window where the breeze carried laughter from the street. "No," she said softly. "It's just changed keys." She picked up her guitar, strummed a soft tune, and began to hum. Hope clapped along, faith swayed to the rhythm. And as her voice floated out into the sunlight, the city seemed to hum with her. Accra alive, forgiven awake. Because some songs end, and some like hers simply stay.